My name is Rachel Hart. I was 36 the year my family showed me what they thought my life was worth. I was standing in a cemetery. Rain had soaked the grass. Mud clung to my boots. In front of me were two fresh graves. My husband, Evan, was in one. My little girl, Mia, was in the other. She was 6. My parents and my brother had not come. They said the burial was a trivial event. Not worth canceling a trip for. Then they flew to Hawaii the very next morning. 5 days after I buried the whole world I loved, my mother finally called me. Not to cry. Not to say sorry. Not to ask if I had eaten. She called to ask for money. And what she said after that is the reason I never called her mom again. Welcome back to Twisted Family Revenge Stories. This is where ordinary women get pushed too far, then answer with more strength than anyone expected. If one of these stories ever made you feel less alone, then stay with me. Because this one starts in the worst week of my life. And it ends in a room where the truth finally had nowhere left to hide. These days, I wake up at 4 in the morning. The house is dark when I step across the gravel. I do not turn the kitchen light on anymore. There is no one there to see it. The first thing I touch each day is cold metal. My truck keys. They warm in my hand before I reach the lot. Then I climb into the cab. It smells like diesel and old coffee. For 20 minutes, before the sun comes up, that smell is the only thing that still feels like mine. I drove long haul for 11 years before all this happened. At truck stops, men used to assume the business belonged to my husband. Sometimes I let them think it. It was easier than explaining. Evan loved that. He thought it was funny. He would sit there eating pie, watching some dispatcher hand him a clipboard, then grin when the man realized the owner was the woman with grease under her nails. I still keep Evan's coffee mug in the cab. I do not drink from it. I just like seeing it there. Riding beside me, the way he used to. People think grief is loud. Most of the time, it is not. Most of the time, it is small. It is reaching for someone without thinking. Then your hand closes on nothing. By the cabin door, there were still 2 little yellow rain boots for months. Mia left them there. I never moved them. Every night, I told myself I would. Every morning, 4 o'clock came again. And I didn't. 11 months before that cemetery call, I still had a family to come home to. I want to tell you how I lost them. But first, I have to tell you how the people who shared my blood decided they had somewhere better to be. It rained for 3 days that spring. Not soft rain. The kind that turns a creek into a wall of water before you can blink. I was 500 miles east on a refrigerated run. I was hauling produce. I do not even remember what kind. I only remember the phone lighting up while I stood at a fuel island in Ohio. Evan had picked Mia up from his mother's place early because of the storm. He was a careful man. 20 years behind the wheel. No tickets. No stupid risks. He was the kind of driver who slowed down for yellow lights even when the truck behind him leaned on the horn. He took the county road home because the highway was flooding. There is a low crossing out by the Mercer farm. Just a little dip of concrete where the creek runs under the road. On a dry day, you barely notice it. That day, the water rose over it while they were on it. They found Evan's pickup a quarter-mile downstream. It was jammed against some cottonwood trees. They found it 2 days later. After the water dropped. I am not going to tell you the rest. Some things do not belong in a story. And Mia was 6. She deserves better than becoming one more sad detail. What I will tell you is this. I drove home in 9 hours. No sleep. Both hands shaking on the wheel. And the whole way, I kept doing math in my head. If I had turned down that run. If I had been home. If I had driven them myself. If I had made Evan fear that crossing the way I did. I reached town after it already knew. There were casseroles on my porch. The sheriff's truck sat in my driveway. I had crossed 4 states in 9 hours. And I was still 9 hours too late. The first call I made was to my mother. I could barely breathe. But I thought if I called anyone on earth, she would come. Her first question was whether the funeral could wait 2 weeks. I remember sitting down on the kitchen floor with the phone in my hand. I thought I had heard her wrong. I had not. She said she and my father already had a trip planned. Hawaii, she said. 8 days. With your brother Derek, his wife Paige, and the kids. She said it had been on the calendar since January. The deposits were paid. I told her my husband and my daughter were dead. She said she understood. But she said it in the same tone someone would use if a coworker said they might miss a meeting. Then Paige took over the family group chat. Paige always takes over. She typed that everyone was so sorry. But the tickets were non-refundable. The children had been looking forward to this for months. And surely I would not expect them to cancel the whole vacation over. I still remember staring at the screen. Because she actually wrote it. A trivial event not worth attending. I read that line 4 times. A trivial event. My daughter's funeral. My mother answered 2 minutes later with a thumbs up and one word. Agreed. Not one of them asked how Mia died. Not one of them asked whether I was alone. Not one of them asked if I had eaten. Not one of them asked what to put on Evan's stone. Or whether the little yellow boots were still by my door. They only asked which week worked better for them. That was the moment I stopped asking. I told them the burial would be Saturday. They were welcome to come. Or not. Then I hung up. I did not call back. That was the first time in my life I understood something cold and clean. They were never going to choose me. Not this time. Not any time. Not once in 36 years had they really chosen me. And the strange thing was, that truth did not break me. It cleared the room. It freed my hands for what came next. At Evan and Mia's funeral, the front pew was marked for family. It stayed empty. I chose not to sit there. I sat in the second row with the people who had actually shown up. My uncle Walter drove 4 hours from Jasper. He stood beside me the whole time with one hand on my shoulder. Like a man holding a fence post steady in a storm. The church filled up. Evan's dispatchers came in work shirts. Ladies from the diner came. Mia's kindergarten teacher came and cried harder than I did. The whole little soccer team came in blue jerseys because Evan coached them on Saturdays. My parents were on a beach. My brother was on a beach. Paige was on a beach. Their empty seats stayed clean while 100 working people packed shoulder to say goodbye to a truck driver and a 6-year-old girl. I gave the eulogy myself. I did not trust anyone else with their names. I said Evan slowed down for yellow lights. I said Mia drew trucks instead of princesses. I said they were the best thing I ever built. And the only thing I could not keep. I did not mention the empty pew. I did not have to. Everyone in that room could see it. After the service, Walter walked me to my truck. He said the only honest thing anyone in my family said that month. Rachel, he told me, they're not coming back to you. Not really. Plan your life like that's true. I buried my husband and my daughter with the people who actually came. Then I stood by their graves while the dirt was still dark. And my phone started buzzing in my coat pocket. My mother. Calling from Honolulu. I let it ring. I had no idea yet what she wanted. 5 days later, she got me because I was tired enough to answer. There was wind in the background. An airport announcement. Her voice came straight to business. Rachel, we need to talk about the money. I sat down. What money? The 40,000. She said it like I should already know. Then she told me Derek's dealership was in trouble. The family needed to pull together. I had to see the bigger picture. And when I did not answer fast enough, she said the line that still wakes me some nights. We can always make more money, Rachel. We can't make more family. She said that to me. To the daughter whose family was in the ground because they would not come home. She said it from an airport in Hawaii. Probably with sand still in her shoes. She was asking me for $40,000 to save the son who had been lying on a beach while my little girl went into the earth. I held the phone away from my face. I looked at the yellow boots by the door. And I thought about how some people use the prettiest word in the world like a crowbar. Family. They use it to pry money out of the person they just left behind. I almost laughed. I almost did something worse. Instead, I asked one quiet question. What 40,000 do you think belongs to you? She went silent. That kind of silence tells you everything. She had already decided she was owed something. She just had not said it out loud yet. And in that pause, I started to understand exactly what they believed. And exactly how wrong they were. For years earlier, before any of this, I had wanted my own truck. A good used tractor cost about $90,000. I had saved most of it. But not all. Evan and I needed a bank loan for the rest. The lender looked over my paperwork and asked where $40,000 of my down payment came from. That money had come from my parents. Years before, at Christmas. They handed it to me right in front of Derek. They called it a gift for my future. Banks do not just take your word for things like that. When part of your down payment comes from family, the lender makes them sign a letter. A real one. It says the money is a gift. It says no repayment is expected. It says the money is not a loan. And never was. Back then, I never thought twice about it. I drove the paperwork to my parents' house myself. I sat at their kitchen table. I watched my mother and father sign that letter with their own hands so I could buy my truck. Then I filed it with the rest of my loan papers and forgot about it. You forget a page like that when you think the people who signed it mean what they wrote. My mother had forgotten it too. Or maybe she had decided it no longer counted. Because now Derek was sinking. And now my husband and child were dead. So in her head, the gift had changed. Now it was an investment. And investments, according to her, could be called back whenever family demanded it. She had no idea what was still sitting in my file cabinet. Derek called the next day. My brother was 33. His whole life, he had been called the responsible one. What that really meant was he was the one my parents kept funding. 2 years earlier, he had opened a car lot with money he did not really have. Now the floor plan loans were choking him. The lot was full of trucks nobody wanted. He did not ask about Mia either. Not once. He opened with the dealership. Then the family. Then the line that told me what he truly thought. Look, Rachel, you're alone now. What do you even need it for? I said nothing. I just let those words hang there. You're alone now. Like my husband and daughter were a bill that had been wiped clean for me. Like grief came with extra cash. Then Paige started texting. Because Paige cannot stand a silence she cannot control. She told me family money was a shared pool. She said I had taken from that pool once. Now it was someone else's turn. And then she added that my attitude was hurting everybody. Shared pool. I had spent my whole life giving back. But you cannot repay people who keep moving the line. The worst part was not the asking. It was finding out they were already telling the family a story. A week later, a cousin called me. She said everyone had heard poor Derek was drowning. And selfish Rachel was sitting on her trucks, refusing to help her own blood. They built the story before I even said no. They had already picked the villain. They just needed me to play the part. That is when I made a choice. I was not going to argue with their lie. I was going to outlast it. I wish I could tell you I never wavered. That would be a lie. I have always been the person who carries the load. Since I was 9, I had been packing Derek's lunches because our mother was tired. So one night, after a week of calls, I sat down with my checkbook. 40,000 would wipe out my safety cushion. But it would make the phone stop. And some tired, broken part of me wanted quiet more than justice. Walter caught me before I signed it. He had started dropping by most evenings. Fixing things that did not need fixing. Sitting in Evan's chair so it would not look so empty. He saw the checkbook on the table. He did not yell. He just looked at me and said, "You'd really write that, wouldn't you? You'd pay them to keep skipping your funerals." That stopped me cold. Because he was right. I was not afraid of being called selfish. I was just so used to being the one who fixed everything that I was about to fix the wrong thing. If you have ever been the person everybody leans on but nobody catches, then you know that feeling. That is the exact moment I stopped carrying people who could not even stand at my daughter's grave. I closed the checkbook. The next morning at 4, I did the one thing that had never failed me. I went back to work. Going back meant facing every person who thought I would fall apart without Evan. The bank officer who handled my credit line asked, in a soft voice that somehow felt worse than rude, whether I had considered selling my equipment while it still had value. One freight broker I had worked with for years started saying he was not sure the business could keep running after everything that happened. I heard from someone else that 2 of them were already telling shippers I would not last the season. A grieving widow with a couple of trucks. They had me buried already. Every morning, my keys were ice cold in my hand. Some mornings, that cold was the only thing holding me upright. But I held on to them. Because they were still mine. Then Marcia found me. Marcia was close to 60. She had run dispatch for 30 years. She had forgotten more about freight than most brokers would ever learn. She took me to a truck stop. Bought me eggs. Looked me right in the eye and said, "Honey, from here on out, people are either working with you or working against you. There is no middle seat. Stop waiting for doubters to come around. Make them matter less." So I did. I called every shipper who had ever trusted Evan. I told them the truth, straight and plain. The owner was still the woman with grease under her nails. The same as always. And she was still on time. I undercut nobody. I outworked everybody. Then, about 3 weeks later, a contract hit my desk that was too big for 2 trucks. A regional grocery chain. Steady freight. Real money. The kind of account that builds a company instead of just feeding one. All I had to do was be brave enough to take it. To take that contract, I needed another tractor on the road fast. So I started cleaning out Evan's old rig to sell it and free up cash. That truck was his pride. He kept oil logs down to the day. There was a little plastic horse Mia had glued to the dash. "So Daddy has a friend," she had said. I sat in that cab for almost an hour before I touched anything. Then I started taking his things out. Slow. Careful. Like I was sorting through the pockets of a man who might wake up if I moved too hard. His sunglasses. A church bulletin. A roll of quarters for the air machine. Then, down in the door pocket, under a folded map, I found his logbook. Not the electronic one the law requires now. The old paper one he still kept from habit. 20 years of his life in pencil. Every run. Every mile. All in his neat block writing. I held it in both hands and could not open it. It felt too much like opening his fingers. I told myself I would read it later. When I was stronger. So I set it on the passenger seat next to his coffee mug and the plastic horse. Then I noticed something. The last page was fuller than the others. It was not a normal log entry. It looked like real writing. A note. More than a note. Something he had written before he died. Something I had never seen. I drove home with that logbook on the seat like it was another passenger. And I will be honest. I was afraid of that page. Some part of me already knew it would change something. And I did not know if I was ready to be changed. It took me 3 days to open it. While that logbook sat on my kitchen table, my family kept working on my name. Paige ran the whole thing like a campaign. The texts came daily. Little reminders of everything my parents had ever done for me. Concern dressed up like guilt. Then guilt dressed up like love. She asked if I had gotten help for how bitter I had become. She sent me a photo of Derek's children. Then a message saying they might lose their house. As if their house and my dead child belonged on the same scale. At the same time, they were feeding lies to every relative who would listen. My cousin Kara called me and told me what was being said. That I had come into money and turned cold. That grief had made me cruel. That my parents were heartbroken by my behavior. Those same parents had been snorkeling while I picked out a tiny casket. They had flipped the whole story upside down. For one day, it made me sick. Because when enough mouths repeat a lie, it starts to feel like weather. Like something hanging over you no matter where you walk. Then something in me cleared. People who rewrite the story so they can stay the victim never choose to put the pen down. Kara, to her credit, was not buying any of it. She said, "I was at that funeral, Ray. I saw the empty pew. I know what happened. I'm not crazy." That was the first crack. One person in that family had seen what I saw. And named it. I did not know yet how much I would need her. But I remembered. A few days later, Kara called again. This time her voice was lower. "They're planning something," she said. My parents' 40th anniversary was coming up. They were throwing a big party at the church hall. The whole family invited. I had no plans to go. But Kara had been at our aunt's kitchen table when my mother and Paige laid out their idea. They were going to corner me there. In front of everyone. My father, Howard, would stand up during the toast and make a family appeal. He would shame me in public. They would frame it like this. The daughter who had been blessed now refused to save her own brother. If I gave in, they won. If I refused, they won that too. Either I paid. Or I looked exactly like the villain they had already described. Kara thought I should stay home. And for a minute, I agreed. Then something inside me went still. Not weak. Still. The way I get on a mountain road when the brakes start feeling hot and fear stops helping. They wanted an audience. 40 people in one room. 40 witnesses. A stage built for my humiliation. But a stage works both ways. And that night, I finally opened the last page of Evan's logbook. I poured coffee I did not drink. Sat at the table. Turned to the back. There it was. His block handwriting. Dated the week before he died. It was not a love letter. Evan was not a love letter man. It was a list. He had titled it the way he titled everything. Plain and clean. Things we're going to do. Buy our own rig outright. No bank. Get our name on the door. Then the line that took the floor out from under me. Heart and daughter. So Mia grows up knowing her mama built something. I just sat there. He had already picked the company name. For our little girl who drew trucks instead of princesses. He wanted her to grow up seeing her mother run something with her own name on it. The next morning, I reached up to the visor in his old cab. I already knew what was there. Mia's crayon drawing. It had been clipped there for 2 years. 3 crooked trucks. A yellow-haired stick woman standing beside them. And underneath, in shaky kindergarten letters. Mama's trucks. I had seen that drawing 100 times. But this time I really saw it. They had called her funeral trivial. They had called my life a shared pool. And I was about to make that little girl's name worth more than their whole vacation ever was. I did not decide that in anger. I decided it slowly. Like a driver dropping into lower gear on purpose. The next week, I filed the paperwork. The business stopped being Rachel Hart, owner-operator. It became Hart and Daughter Freight. I kept the daughter. Even though she was gone. Because some names do not stay because someone is alive. They stay because you loved them enough to earn them. Changing the company name changed something in me too. I was not just surviving grief anymore. I had something to build. Something with my daughter's name on it. And people had lied about both of us. That is when I decided I would go to the anniversary party. Not to scream. I have never won anything by being the loudest person in a room. I was not about to start there. I would go for one reason. To set the truth down in front of every witness they gathered. And let it sit there where nobody could spin it. But in my family, truth alone was never enough. They bent it too easily. I needed something they could not argue with. Something with their own names on it. So I remembered the gift letter. 4 years old. Still filed away somewhere. I was not sure my copy was clear enough. But I knew the bank would have the original in my closed loan file. If I was going to lay that page in front of 40 people, it had to be official. So I called the bank. I asked how to get a certified copy of a document from my own old loan file. The woman on the phone said it would take a few days. And a small fee. That was it. A few days. A small fee. That was the whole price of the page that was going to turn their faces white. I marked the party on my calendar. And I started counting down. Not in fear anymore. In readiness. The loan officer who pulled my file was younger than the man from my original closing. But he found it. I sat across from him while he turned through 4-year-old papers. Then he slid one page across the desk. And there they were. My mother's signature. My father's signature. Above them, in plain bank language. The funds represent a gift. No repayment is expected. This is not a loan in any form. I looked at those signatures for a long time. They had written the truth once. Even if they had forgotten it later. I had the officer make me a certified copy, stamped and dated. Then I drove home with it flat on the passenger seat. Like it might fly away if I hit one hard turn. That whole drive, I heard Derek's voice in my head. You're alone now. What do you even need it for? Now I knew. Not the money. I did not want the money. I wanted proof. I wanted one page that showed which of us was telling the truth. And I wanted it in front of the people they had lied to. I was not building a case so I could yell. I was building a case so I could stay calm while they didn't. That is the thing nobody tells you. The strongest person in the room is almost never the loudest one. Usually, it is the quiet one holding the paper. While I waited for the party, the company grew. I took the grocery contract. Then I bought a second tractor. Then leased a third when the freight kept coming. I had real drivers now. Good ones. Men and one woman who had left bigger companies because I paid fair and did not lie to them. We painted the trucks deep green. Clean white letters on both doors. Heart and Daughter Freight. And under that, small enough to miss if you were not looking, I had me as 3 crooked crayon trucks painted on each one. The first time I saw all 3 lined up in the yard, I had to sit in my truck and breathe for a while. That broker who said I would not last the season called to ask if I had room for overflow loads. The bank officer who once suggested I sell quietly expanded my credit line without me even asking. Funny how fast "she'll never make it" turns into "we always believed in you" once the trucks are moving and the invoice is clear. I did not brag. I just remembered. Small towns carry news fast. That news reached my family too. Suddenly, the daughter who was alone now was running a real company with her name on 3 trucks. They could smell success from a mile away. The same people who skipped the funeral started liking my posts online. My mother texted me the first warm sentence she had sent in months. "We are so proud of what you've built, honey." Proud. Of the very thing they tried to take from me. I did not answer. I just checked that the certified copy was still by the door. And kept counting the days. The closer the party got, the harder my mother worked to save her story. She stopped pushing for the check. Now she wanted control. At church. At the salon. At my aunt's table. She told people success had gone to my head. She said I had let one tragedy turn me bitter against my own blood. One tragedy. That was how she talked about my husband and my child. And she kept reaching for the same line she used on me from the airport. We can't make more family. She said it with that sad little shake of the head. As if I were the one who had gone to Hawaii. As if I were the one who called a child's funeral trivial. Kara became my eyes inside the family. And she did something I will never forget. She did not fight. She did not gossip back. She just told the truth in plain language. When someone repeated my mother's story, Kara would say, "That's strange." I was at the funeral. Linda and Howard weren't. They were in Hawaii. I have the dates. That was enough. People started doing the math. And then the whole lie cracked wider because of one stupid photo. My mother loved posting happy pictures online. She hated checking dates. Still sitting on her page from that spring was a bright beach picture. Flower lays around their necks. Frozen drinks in hand. Derek's kids smiling in the surf. The caption said something about making memories. The date on it was the day after Evan and Mia were buried. Kara found it. She did not have to say anything nasty. She just put that beach photo beside the funeral date and let people look. That was all. You can twist a phone call. You can twist a story. You cannot twist a timestamp. Suddenly, people who had believed my mother were holding two facts in their hands. One date. Then another. Between them sat an ocean and a little girl's grave. Some relatives came to me after that. Awkward. Embarrassed. They said they had not known. That my mother told them I never invited anyone. Another lie. I did not shame them. I simply said the funeral had been open to anybody who wanted to come. And I had been grateful for the people who did. That photo did more for me than 100 angry words ever could. It turned their witnesses into mine. And the party was 4 days away. 4 days before the party, I did something I had not been able to do since the accident. I drove out to the lake. Not the crossing. I will never go back to the crossing. The lake upstream. The one where Evan used to take Mia on Sunday mornings to skip rocks while I caught up on sleep. I went at dawn. The water was flat and silver. No wind. Everything still. I had avoided that place for almost a year. I thought it would break me. It did not. I sat on the bank with a real cup of coffee. Not Evan's. Mine. And I talked to them. I told Mia about the trucks. I told Evan I had used the company name. I told them what I planned to do at that party. And I asked them out loud if I was doing it for the right reason. Sitting there in that stillness, I got my answer. I did not want my parents destroyed. I did not want Derek's children to lose their home. I am not made in a way that enjoys watching people fall. Even them. What I wanted was smaller. And harder. I wanted the truth on the record. I wanted 40 people to know what really happened so the next time my mother called my daughter's death a trivial event, there would be a whole room of people who knew she was lying. I did not want revenge. I wanted truth to stop being optional. For people like my family, those two things feel the same. And by then, I had stopped caring how truth felt to them. The water stayed still. For the first time, standing there did not break me. It leveled me. The night before the party, Walter came by. He had heard enough by then to know something was coming. He offered to go with me. To stand beside me. To make sure I was not alone in that room. It was a loving offer. I told him no. Not because I did not want him there. Because I finally understood I did not need a shield. A shield is for someone walking into a loss. I was not going in to lose. I was going in with the truth and one stamped page and the calmest hands I had felt in almost a year. "Walter," I said, "if I bring back up, it looks like a fight. I'm not going there to fight. I'm going to tell 40 people something true. Then I'm going to leave." He looked at me for a long time. Then nodded. The same way he had nodded at the funeral. Like a man who knew when to hold the fence steady and when to let it stand on its own. "Your father never had your spine," he said. "Neither did your brother." I took that for the gift it was. After he left, I laid out my clothes. Plain. Dark. Nothing special. I put the certified gift letter in my coat pocket. One folded page. Then I hung that coat by the door. 40 years of marriage. $40,000. 40 people invited. And I was bringing one page to answer all of it. I slept better that night than I had since the burial. Once you know exactly what you are going to do, fear runs out of places to hide. The church hall smelled like carnations and coffee and potluck food. They had decorated it nicely. White tablecloth. Sheet cake with my parents' wedding photo printed in sugar. A gold banner that said 40 years. About 40 relatives. I noticed that and almost laughed. 40 years. 40,000. 40 people. My mother saw me walk in. Her face changed fast. First surprise. Then triumph. She had not been sure I would come. Now that I had, she thought I had stepped right into the trap she built. Paige kissed my cheek. Derek would not look at me. I took a paper plate of cake I never planned to eat. Then I waited. Because I already knew the script. There is a strange peace that comes over you when you are the only one in the room who knows how the scene really ends. They got through the toasts. Then my father stood up. Tapped his fork against a glass. The room quieted for him. I watched him decide to do it in front of everyone. He thanked people for coming. He talked about love. About loyalty. About family stepping up in hard times. Then he turned to me. Slow. Careful. Public. Some of us, he said, have been blessed and have forgotten where the blessing came from. We helped Rachel when she had nothing. $40,000. And now that she's doing well, she won't lift a finger for her own brother. A murmur moved through the room. Right on cue, Paige added, "Sweet as poison, it's such a shame. We even missed that funeral for family. And this is the thanks we get. A funeral for family." She had done it again. In front of everybody. Called the trip the bigger cause. The room turned toward me. My mother sat with her hands folded. Certain she had already won. I set down my paper plate. Then I stood up. I did not raise my voice. That mattered more than anything. They were waiting for a scene. I gave them quiet. And quiet, in a loud room, is its own kind of thunder. "Dad," I said, "you're right that you gave me $40,000. Let's talk about that. But first, let's talk about the funeral since Paige brought it up." I reached into my coat. Took out one sheet of paper. Unfolded it slowly. Laid it flat on the white tablecloth beside the cake. It was a printed timeline. Simple. Just dates. "This," I said, touching one line, "is the day my husband and daughter were buried." Then I moved my finger. "And this is the date on the beach photo Mom posted the next morning. Flower lays. Drinks in hand. Making memories." I looked up. "You didn't miss the funeral for family. You skipped a child's funeral for a vacation. Then you came home and asked that child's mother for $40,000. The room went dead still. My father opened his mouth. Then shut it. My mother's face started draining color. Then Derek did what loud people do when they feel truth closing in. He exploded. He shot out of his chair. His face was red. He started shouting. That I was twisting things. That the dealership was dying. That I owed the family. That I was selfish. Alone. Bitter. Every word louder than the last. Every bit of the script. Just at full volume now. I let him finish. When he ran out of breath, I reached into my coat again. I pulled out the second page. The certified copy. I set it on the table next to the timeline. Then slid it across the cloth toward my father. You both signed this, I said. 4 years ago. At your kitchen table. It's the gift letter my bank required. It says, in your own signatures, that the $40,000 was a gift. No repayment expected. Not a loan in any form. I let those words sit there. So you can ask me for money if you want. Anybody can ask. But you cannot call it a debt. Not after swearing on paper it wasn't one. Then I said the 3 things I had come there to say. To Paige, I said, you taught me which events are worth attending. I'll remember that for the rest of my life. To my mother, who had gone pale as paper, I said, you told me we can't make more family. You were right. So I stopped trying to make one out of you. Then I turned to Derek. He was still standing there. Hands open now. Rage draining out. You asked what I even needed it for, I said. I needed it to bury my daughter. You needed Hawaii. No one moved. No one spoke. Then a chair scraped from the back of the hall. Kara stood up. Clear voice. No shaking. I was at that funeral, she said. Everything Rachel said is true. I have the dates too. That was the turn. Slow at first. Then all at once. One aunt I had barely spoken to in years reached forward and slid the gift letter closer to the middle of the table so more people could read it. Folks who came ready to judge me were now looking at the timeline, the signatures, the beach date. Doing the only honest thing left. Feeling ashamed of what they had believed. My mother said my name once. Rachel. Like a question. Like maybe there was still some version of this where I sat back down and we all ate cake. There wasn't. And then Derek did something I did not expect. He stopped shouting. Completely. For the first time in nearly a year, I saw what sat under all that noise. Fear. Real fear. He was terrified. Terrified of losing the lot. Terrified of losing the house. Terrified his kids would feel every bit of it. And he had gambled the whole family on bullying me into saving him. Now the room was looking at him instead. Ray, he said. Quiet now. I'm scared. And I believed him. That was the closest thing to honesty any of them had offered me in 11 months. And I felt that old reflex twitch. The one that had packed his lunches. The one that fixed his messes. But even then, he still had not said Mia's name. Not once. Not sorry. Not about the funeral. Not about the empty pew. Scared for himself. Never sorry for me. So I folded my 2 papers. Put them back in my coat. And gave him the truest answer I had left. I hope you figure it out, Derek. I really do. But you're going to have to figure it out without me. Then I walked out. Into the parking lot. Into cold, clean air. And for the first time in months, I could breathe all the way down. The lie that I owed them $40,000 died in that church hall. It never came back. They could have asked for help. Anybody can ask. What they could not do anymore was call it a debt. Not after their own signatures sat on that tablecloth for everyone to read. Relatives who had been ready to chip in toward Derek's repayment quietly shut their checkbooks after that. The dealership folded in the fall. I heard about it the same way I hear about all of them now. Second-hand. From Kara. With no real feeling in my chest one way or the other. I went no contact with my parents and with Derek. Not with a big speech. Not with some dramatic letter. I just stopped answering. Eventually, they stopped calling. And the quiet that came after them was one of the most peaceful sounds I had ever heard. I kept the people who showed up. Walter comes for Sunday dinner now. He still sits in Evan's chair. And I have made peace with that. Because if somebody is going to sit there, I'm glad it's someone good. Kara and I talk every week. Marcia is half retired, but she still answers when I call with a freight problem. Hart and Daughter Freight runs 5 trucks now. All deep green. All with 3 crooked little crayon trucks painted on the doors. Small enough that you only notice if you look. People ask about them. Drivers at truck stops. Warehouse guys at docks. And I get to say her name out loud. Mia. My daughter drew that. Her name lives on the side of every truck rolling down roads Evan and I once ran together. Eventually, I moved the yellow boots. Not far. Just to a shelf where I can still see them when I leave at 4. And one Sunday this spring, almost a year later, I drove back to the lake at dawn with a fistful of wild daisies. The water was flat and silver again. No wind. I left the flowers on the bank for the 2 people who really built me. The lake did not break me that time either. It just held still. And somehow, held me still with it. I do not reach for my phone out there anymore. There is nobody on it I am waiting to hear from. I have the people who came when there was nothing to gain. And I let go of the people who only showed up when there was. That is the whole truth of it. Family is not blood. Family is who comes when the room is empty. Who stands at the grave. Who stays when there is no money in it. My story is simple. A funeral they called trivial. A trip they would not cancel. A page they signed and forgot. And a room full of people who finally saw the truth at the same time. If someone in your life keeps asking you to carry them while they skip your hardest days, let this be your sign. Put the page down. You do not owe a debt you never signed for. And you do not have to keep begging strangers with your last name to act like family.